Hello, everybody. Jack Chris here with the Now See Here podcast on anchor.fm/Now See Here. We are recording live as usual from CC's Coffee House in Ridgeland, Mississippi. We want to thank CC's again and SettleMyCase.com upstairs. Hello to our YouTube audience. We are pleased to welcome another strong woman on the lineup this week, Miss Christina Dent, who is the founder of Ended for Good. Christina, welcome to Now See Here.
Thanks so much for having me.
We got to get, I think, a mic's off there, Roddy. Okay.
Thanks so much for having me.
There you go. See, say it again. But this is live podcasting.
That's right.
This is how we do it. Ended for good. What do you want to end for good, Christina?
The war on drugs.
Why?
So I began to learn through the last couple of years being a foster parent that there's two kinds of harm coming from drugs in the world, really, in our country and in our state, but really worldwide. One of those is coming from the drugs themselves, like what substances can do when you ingest them. But I'm convinced now that research clearly shows that the vast majority of all harms related to drugs are actually coming from drug prohibition. So kind of like with alcohol, during alcohol prohibition, we have harms today from alcohol, even though it's not prohibited anymore. But we had the whole new category of harms when we prohibited alcohol.
The bootleggers and the black market.
Yeah, the black market came in. We had alcohol poisoning. Thousands of people died from alcohol poisoning because there was no more quality control, or, people didn't know what they were getting. They were cooking something up in their backyard and selling it, and it had all kinds of contaminants in it.
Well, Christina, I'm a libertarian, okay? So you're singing my song. But what I'm hearing from people who have been to Colorado and other states where the cannabis is legal, is that it is so much stronger than what was on the street years ago, and that it is a gateway drug. Now, they don't say that about alcohol for some reason. Alcohol is fine. You can drink all you want to, and you're not going to want to get a better high. But for some reason, it's always marijuana. Now, do you think that if we legalize drugs, that there's going to be some type of moral acceptance that we're saying, oh, it's okay to get stoned, it's okay to get high?
No, I don't think so. So I think there's also two moral issues happening here. So one is the moral issue of whether or not we should ingest these substances, whatever they are, including legal substances. There's certainly people that feel
harm to the body,
harm to the body from alcohol or from nicotine. Is that moral? Even though they're legal. But there's also a moral weight to what happens when you criminalize. Is it morally okay to tear apart a family through incarceration, to put children in foster care just because their parent was smoking marijuana and got arrested for it, and maybe they don't have the family support for the kids to go somewhere else while their parent is incarcerated? Is it okay to have people dying of preventable overdoses because they're getting contaminated drugs on the street instead of safe substances that they can access legally? Now, when I talk about legal regulation for all drugs, which is what we advocate for a fully regulated drug market.
Government
legalize
control,
everything,
yeah,
but regulated. So This is not candy store. This isn't next to the gummy bears. This is a regulated market, like we do for alcohol. We regulate it. We say, there's age restrictions for purchasing it. You can only sell it in certain kinds of stores, that sort of thing.
When I was a teenager and pot was being bought and sold everywhere, there was always the case of pot being laced with embalming fluid and also being laced with PCP. And I had a very close friend who almost died because he smoked some pot and it had PCP, and he just went out of his mind. So that would correct that problem. I looked at your Facebook page, and you almost have to tell people that you are a Christian and you are a Republican.
Right.
That you're not some far-out libertarian, we crazy libertarians are who want to legalize everything, prostitution and everything.
Yeah.
But why do you feel you have to say that? I mean, is it unchristian to, or does it go against Christian ethics to say, all right, it's one thing to ingest a substance, it's another thing to commit a crime after doing so.
So I can speak for myself. The culture that I grew up here in Mississippi, very conservative, very universally Republican pretty much from my childhood. I never thought about the distinction between what is wrong from a biblical perspective and what should actually be illegal. In my mind, they were kind of the same thing. It never occurred to me until just a couple years ago, somebody said, well, adultery is not, we don't put people in jail for that. And that's clearly harmful, clearly sinful from the Bible's standpoint, always harms more than one person. You're tearing a family apart by the definition of adultery. And I just thought, wait, what? I've never thought about that before. So I think there's been so much of an intertwining of faith and politics. And in some ways that can be helpful, that we're living out our values, and it can also be really harmful if we're not careful. That if we made illegal all sin, I mean, literally all of us would be in jail. I mean, from a biblical perspective of what is sin. So we can't say that just because something's wrong means it should be illegal.
We don't want to stone people like they do in Muslim countries, and
Yeah,
women are sentenced to death for adultery and this
so
sort
we
of
say,
thing.
okay, we have to make some nuance. This is not clear cut here. So I would say we have to go back to then, so what is the goal with drugs? Why have people like me supported drug prohibition for so long? And I would say, I always thought because it was reducing harm to people. It was the less harmful way to handle these substances. So if we walk back and we say, what's the big goal? And we come back to, I think most people think, well, we're trying to have fewer people harmed from drugs. Then we say, okay, if our goal is less harm, and we look at the research that's out there, there is no question that legalizing and regulating the market causes far less harm, not just to people who are using drugs, but to their families, to communities, to children, than it does to criminalize it.
And I want to go into that further, but I think the spiritual and psychological question needs to be asked, and that is, why does a person feel the need to alter reality or get stoned in the first place? I mean, I guess it's the same reason why people want to have a couple of drinks. They want to have a buzz, or they're trying to escape from something.
Right.
So we need to look at, on an individual basis, what are you trying to escape from, as opposed to, what you're taking or what you're doing. Christina Dent is my guest. Have you taken heat from this? You're a Christian, you're a Republican. Have you said, have you had people say, why are you defending these terrible drug users?
I have, but so my goal is always to invite people into the conversation. I do get really angry about the harm that's happening. I don't project that out, because the only way that I was able to slowly change my mind on this is because other people gave me a safe place to ask questions, to feel kind of the feeling of what happens when something you believed your whole life gets challenged. That's not a comfortable feeling, feels like an earthquake. So not a whole lot, because I think people feel that they don't have to respond with anger, because I'm not coming to the table with anger. I want to have the conversation. I want to invite them to consider that there's more at stake than just, do we want people using drugs?
You're not on the attack. You're not on the offensive. Oh, all right. Is there a personal story here?
Yeah.
Why did you get involved? Was there a family member, or did you know somebody?
No, so we became foster parents.
Well, you mentioned it,
a couple of years ago. And so the second baby that we fostered came to our house as a newborn from the hospital. He'd been removed from his mom's custody because of her prenatal drug use. And I met her early on. I brought him to his first visit with her at the child welfare office, and we came into the parking lot, and I hadn't met her before, and everything I thought about people who use drugs was, she must not love her child. She wouldn't have done this if she loved him. And so I got his car seat out of my car and turned around, and here she comes, sprinting across the parking lot with tears streaming down her face. She's covering him with kisses, telling him how much she's missed him. And that did not fit at all with what I thought about people who use drugs and were addicted, and moms who were using them while they were pregnant. And I was really suspicious of it and thought, this can't be real. This just doesn't fit. But I got to know Joanne over time. They were reunified, and she has been sober since he was born now. That's 3.5 years ago. And I saw her as what she really is, which is a mom like me. She loves her son just as much as I love my kids. Addiction is not a lack of love. It's not I want to ruin my life. It's a totally different, complex health, spiritual, social crisis. It is not a criminal justice issue. It is a complex health issue. And I could see that if we put her in jail, that would be catastrophic for their family. She's a wonderful mother today.
And yet they are.
Right.
Put in jail.
Right. And I could see that too through foster care, that not every mom was being treated like Joanne. Nikki was not. She's serving a prison sentence today in North Mississippi, 15 years for prenatal drug use. So you look at those two families and you say, it doesn't always happen like Joanne. Not everybody's able to get sober and be able to parent. But Nikki, her family is a nuclear bomb on their family for the next 15 years. There's no chance of a positive outcome for the next 15 years for them. Then they can try to rebuild.
Let's talk about opiates and that epidemic we're hearing, okay? And I did a solo show on this. I get a little suspicious when all of a sudden the media, the government, everybody gets together and says there's a crisis. I really got upset the other evening. I was watching local news, and the young woman, the broadcaster, said that you can take one pill, one narcotic, opiate, and get addicted. That's not true.
It's not true.
Because I have suffered from kidney stones, and I've had to take a lot, and I'm ready to get off of it. You know, I don't like the way I feel. Are you also advocating, with this new war on opiates that has all of a sudden become the rage, are you against that?
So what's happened is you'll hear some people say, I took one pill and that was it, I was hooked. And we always have to be looking at
their physiology,
like what you said, right? And that when people become addicted, the drugs have become a solution for another problem. The drugs are not really the problem. It's what they're masking, what they either don't want to feel or why their life is something they have a hard time being fully present for. So there is a physical addiction cannot happen after one exposure to a drug, but a psychological strong desire to feel that way
high,
again, you know, to not have to feel the other way, to escape
from something,
can certainly happen with anything, not just drugs. It can happen with gambling, it can happen with pornography, it can happen with all kinds of things that can destroy your life because they overtake what you thought they were helping you with. You know, they were acting as a helper, and now they're destroying your life. So what the government has done, unfortunately, with the slow increase in overdoses that was happening over the last couple of decades, is they cracked down on prescriptions. The problem is that the illegal market's always going to fill any market void that's there. And so as we have cracked down on prescriptions, the death rate has dramatically increased. If we had done nothing, tens of thousands of people would be alive today that are not, who are dead. This is tragic because the government cracked down on prescribing, and people are being driven to the streets and they're dying from overdoses from drugs that are laced.
Many physicians have told me that a person who needs these pain medications, if that is taken from them or they're cut back or cut off, they go to stronger street medications, they become criminals. They do get addicted because heroin and meth, you can get addicted very easily to that, as opposed to Vicodin or Percocet or whatever the drug is. Decrease harm, help people thrive. That's your slogan. Are you helping people? Are you making a difference? Have you seen some tangible results? And how long have you been doing this, Christina?
So I started 2 years ago in the summer of 2016. I hosted a book discussion with some friends over the book Chasing the Scream, The First and Last Days of the War on Drugs by Johann Hari.
That's an excellent book.
Yeah, if anybody wants a copy, you can email me, Christina@enditforgood.com. I'll send you a free copy. We provide them. We sponsor them for Mississippi readers. And
I'm trying to get him on the show, by the way.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
I think, so that was the beginning of it. Just a few months ago, we filed for nonprofit status with the state of Mississippi. So it kind of started out as, I'm interested in this, and I think we're doing something wrong, and it's now become a life passion for me. And now I run a nonprofit to do it. And I think I don't feel like I am starting a movement. I feel like I am giving voice to a movement that's already been there. People are tired of what we've been doing. They want a different approach. They maybe have not had a chance to hear it through a voice that they can agree with, because so much it's coming from the left or from libertarians, people that they don't feel like they can agree with. And
even the left is getting in on this. Even Democrats are saying we need to ban everything.
Yeah, so I think even the people that are talking about reform, a lot of times it can be mixed in with other issues that Republicans don't agree with. And so it feels like, well, I can't support that organization because they're also advocating for other things that I have a problem with. I talk about End It for Good as a conservative nonprofit advocating for drug legalization. That's what it is. I'm a Republican. I think it's consistent with conservative values. We want employed citizens. We want strong families. We want safer communities. Vast majority of all crime is driven by drug prohibition.
Let's not forget William F. Buckley Jr. was an advocate for total drug legalization, all drugs. what the churches, how do they feel about this? Ministers that you've talked to, are they on your side?
So there have been a number of pastors who have come to the discussions that I lead. So now I lead discussions all over the state. Some of them are book discussions on chasing the scream, but some of them are just community discussions. They're open to anybody to come. We provide dinner for everybody to come. It's 2 hours. They do a presentation. We discuss, explore this, ask your questions. We've had a lot of pastors who have come, and there are mixed responses. There are a lot of pastors who agree with it and don't feel like there is the social and spiritual space yet to say so publicly. Because it feels like such a political issue. We have made it feel like that through lots of legislation that's made it feel like that. And so it's hard for people to see there's more to it. And that's what I hope, to help people see the bigger picture of what's happening, all the harm that's coming from criminalization. And then I think people can begin to see what the spiritual impact of this is. If you start at the spiritual point, they have a really hard time. You need to really understand what's happening before you can begin to see how what you believe fits into that.
We did a podcast earlier with Amanda Hamilton, and we're echoing some of the same themes. Joel Baumgar is a conservative Republican in the House of Representatives who is actually for certain drug legalization. I don't know if you knew that or not. And Joel is working, I think, reaching across the aisle, and we're seeing, I think, more national politicians do this, but are you primarily basing your work or trying to affect change in Mississippi? Are you regional? How far does In It for Good extend?
So my goal is always, this is my home state. I was born and raised here. So I want to see change here. In Mississippi, we have the third highest incarceration rate in the country. We are absolutely destroying ourselves through our harsh penalties and the way that we're waging the war on drugs here, and lots of other things that are creating that high incarceration rate. So I want to change Mississippi, and the way that I think about it is, if Mississippi can change, then the South can change, and if the South can change, then the nation can change, and if the United States changes on drug policy, we hold the keys to that for a lot of the world, because we were the ones that started it 100 years ago in the first place.
Is that your biggest challenge, doing what you're doing in Mississippi, a very conservative state?
Yes, but part of the reason Mississippi is so hard to change is just that it's so connected. People have such deep roots here, and it's so hard to go against the way we've always done things, or the way that a lot of us have lived for decades doing things with drugs. But what I found is that that is actually also an asset. So people who change their minds have all of these connections to invite other people to change their minds. And that's how these discussions have grown. People say, come and do it in my town, and I'll invite all of the people that I know. So we've had mayors and city council and other elected officials, candidates for statewide office have come to these because they're interested in it, and I have found it to be much less challenging than I actually thought it would be. And that's why I feel like I'm giving a voice to things people have wanted to say but have not had a space to say them.
Have you reached out, speaking of political candidates, we've got a lot of big races coming up in primaries. Have you reached out to the big boys? And I'm talking about Tate Reeves, Jim Hood, Bill Waller Jr. Have you tried to approach them?
No, I haven't. So I'm always looking for people who know candidates who can invite them into this conversation, can give them a book. And we've done that with some of the statewide candidates for higher offices, with people who know them, and say, yeah, I would be willing to use my social capital with them and say, hey, can you read this book? This is a discussion that's happening in our state. But for Mississippi, our elected officials can only go as far as the people are willing to let them. And so I focus all of my efforts on reaching regular Mississippians. As much as we can change our minds, we provide more window of space for our elected officials to also move forward. Some of them don't want to move forward, but some of them do, and just don't feel like they have the space to move on that yet. So we're trying to create more space for them to say, hey, my constituents support this.
And positive to negative support ratio I would assume it's much more positive.
Heavily positive. For me, I would say 98% of the interactions that I have are positive. Even if they're with people who haven't changed their minds, they are appreciative that it's being presented in a way that doesn't feel like they're being bashed or why are you being so hateful? People don't feel like they're doing anything wrong by supporting the drug war. They still think it's helping. So, if I can't help them take those steps, I want to help them take one step at a time.
When do you think this war will be won, or will it ever be won?
I think it'll be won in my lifetime.
Incrementally, or will it be a big sweep one day?
No, and nor should it be a big sweep. So I would say incrementally, the way that marijuana legalization has been done, on the West Coast and now moving to the Midwest and the East Coast and hopefully to the South. I think it will be incrementally, and part of why that is helpful is that we can see what's working in states that have done it already, and we can do it even better the next states that do it. So I think it should be done incrementally. When all drugs were legal 100 years ago, it's a different time, a different culture. The world has changed so dramatically by then. It should be incremental, but it should be happening, not just incremental sometime out in the future, but we need to be taking those active steps. Every day we continue this, we have more families like Nikki's that are getting 15-year prison sentences, and their families are being destroyed. We could have more families like Joanne, who it may not always work out, but they have an opportunity for it to work out. She's parenting. Her son has a great mom.
Before we give your contact information, because I know a lot of people are going to want to reach out to you and probably help you and support you in what you're doing, what about law enforcement? What kind of relationship do you have with our law enforcement officials? Are they being helpful, or because they have a job to arrest people, whatever their views are or not, they have to carry out what they are assigned to do. So, what is your relationship with our law enforcement community?
We've actually had a lot of law enforcement that have come to these discussions. We've had FBI, state, local, federal. They're not all coming saying that they agree. Some of them are, and some of them say, their personal views are maybe different than the lobbying groups for law enforcement. For some of them would personally support this kind of change, but as a group, they don't support it yet. But I've had really positive interactions with law enforcement, and I think, I am not against law enforcement. I think we need to separate.
No,
we're not against law
either.
enforcement personnel. We're against bad laws. And we've had bad laws in the history of our country. And we will again. And so in the same way that we've had to say, you know what, this is a harmful law. We thought it was going to help. It's been disastrously harmful. We can admit that, and we can say, you know what, our law enforcement, they're joining this profession because they want to help people. And we are sending them out to enforce a war that's causing massive amounts of harm to people and communities. And I think there's a moral weight to what we're asking our law enforcement to do, and I don't think we should be.
And it's taking them away from pursuing
violent crimes, and our success rate on solving violent crimes is pretty low.
The organization is called End It for Good. Christina Dent is are you the CEO?
Founder and president.
The big grand poobah. How can people get in touch with you, your website? Because I know they're going to want to, and we'll have you on again, I'm sure. But tell us.
Yep. You can go to enditforgood.com. You can email me at Christina@enditforgood.com. I also have a podcast that comes out every 2 weeks. We kind of take little bits of the drug war. And
everybody's doing a podcast.
Right. Do them one by one.
Sorry.
And if you want to come to a community discussion somewhere in Mississippi, you can find those on our Facebook page at End It for Good MS. We'll be in Ocean Springs in a couple of weeks, in Oxford in a couple of weeks, South Haven next month. All over the place. We do about 2 a month.
You've got a great website. I looked at it,
Thank you.
Did a little research, and I don't do a whole lot of research because I like to learn as we go, but it really is impressive and easy to navigate. So Christina Dent has been our guest. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
And, I told Amanda earlier, I don't know, I'm a libertarian for the most part, and the libertarian community is on your side. So you need to get in touch with some of those folks, and perhaps I can help you with that. So
fantastic.
I'll work with you on that. I'm Jack Christ. This is the Now See Here podcast. Hello again to our YouTube audience. And Christina, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Folks, take care. We'll be talking again soon. Until then, thanks for listening and supporting the Now See Here podcast.